The sound of a baby's desperate cries pierced through the still Montana night, echoing across the wooden walls of Clara Wilson's small homestead. Clara had finally collapsed into her bed after 3 sleepless nights, her body surrendering to exhaustion despite her infant son's persistent wailing. 24 years old and newly widowed, she hadn't slept properly since the fever took her husband James 4 months ago, leaving her alone with 6-month-old Samuel in this unforgiving land. Montana Territory, 1876. The homestead sat isolated at the edge of a sprawling valley, miles from the nearest town of Whispering Pines. The night was moonless, making the stars appear brighter than usual, their silver light filtering through the cabin's single window. Outside, Beau Dawson pulled his horse to a stop. At 32, he'd spent the last 15 years of his life on horseback, working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, and he knew better than to be riding at night. But after parting ways with his last outfit, he'd been eager to reach Whispering Pines before dawn. The sound of the crying baby caused him to pause. In the vast emptiness of the Montana wilderness, a baby's cry was the last thing he expected to hear. He dismounted cautiously, approaching the small cabin. The crying continued, unabated, desperate. No adult voices attempted to soothe the child, no footsteps moved inside the cabin. Just the persistent wail of a baby in distress. Beau hesitated at the door, removing his hat. He wasn't in the habit of intruding on private homes, but something felt wrong. He knocked firmly, 3 sharp raps that should have been heard over the baby's cries. No response. He knocked again, louder this time. "Hello, anyone home?" When silence still greeted him, Beau tried the door handle. It wasn't locked. The door swung open to reveal a modest but clean interior, dimly lit by a dying fire in the hearth. The baby's cries grew louder, coming from a wooden cradle in the corner. He stepped inside, scanning the one-room cabin. A figure lay motionless on the bed along the far wall. "Madam." He called, concerned. The woman didn't stir. Beau approached the cradle first, peering down at the red-faced infant whose tiny fists punched at the air in distress. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his deep voice a stark contrast to the high-pitched wailing. The baby paused momentarily at the sound of his voice, blinking up with tear-filled eyes before resuming his cries. Beau glanced uncertainly toward the bed. The woman appeared to be breathing, but deeply asleep. He moved closer, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the paleness of her face. Not illness, he judged, but exhaustion. He returned to the cradle, bending down awkwardly. He'd never had much experience with babies. "Your mama needs her rest, little man," he whispered. The baby continued crying, his tiny body rigid with distress. "I'll sing him to sleep," Beau decided aloud, surprising himself with the offer. After a moment's hesitation, he carefully lifted the infant, supporting his head the way he'd seen women do. The baby felt impossibly small in his large, calloused hands. Holding the child against his chest, Beau began to hum softly, a lullaby his own mother had sung to him decades ago. The baby's cries faltered slightly, his eyes fixing on Beau's face with curious intensity. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Beau's deep voice was gentle as he began to sing, rocking slightly as he paced the small cabin. The song was the only one he knew that seemed appropriate for a baby, and he sang it softly, over and over. Gradually, the infant's cries subsided to whimpers, then to occasional hiccups, his small hand clutching at Beau's weathered shirt. Beau continued singing, watching as the baby's eyelids grew heavy, then finally closed. He stood there for several minutes more, still singing quietly, making sure the child was truly asleep before carefully returning him to the cradle. The woman on the bed hadn't stirred, and Beau realized she must be completely exhausted to sleep through her baby's desperate cries. He stoked the dying fire, adding a few logs from the stack beside the hearth, ensuring the cabin would stay warm through the night. Then he silently slipped outside, closing the door behind him. Beau hesitated beside his horse. The night was cold, and it didn't seem right to leave a woman and baby alone in such isolation, especially with the woman so deeply asleep. He decided to make camp nearby, just to ensure all remained well until morning. Clara woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the silence. The sun was already high in the sky. She'd slept far longer than she had in months. With a jolt of panic, she sat up, eyes darting to Samuel's cradle. Her heart nearly stopped when she found it empty. "Samuel," she cried, leaping from the bed. "He's right here, madam," came a deep voice from the doorway. Clara whirled around to see a tall, broad-shouldered man standing in her open doorway, holding Samuel comfortably against his chest. The baby was awake but content, sucking on his fist. "Who are you?" Clara demanded, her voice shaking as she backed toward the rifle propped beside her bed. "What are you doing with my son?" The stranger stepped into the cabin slowly, making no sudden movements. "Name's Beau Dawson, madam. I was passing by last night when I heard your little one crying. You were sleeping so soundly, I didn't have the heart to wake you. This morning when he started fussing again, I thought I'd let you rest a bit longer." Clara's hand remained near the rifle, her eyes never leaving her son. "Give him to me, now, of course." Beau carefully handed Samuel to her, and Clara clutched her baby close, examining him for any sign of harm. Samuel gurgled happily, seeming perfectly content. "I fed him a bit of goat's milk I found in your cold box," Beau explained, stepping back to give her space. "Hope that was all right." He seemed mighty hungry. Clara studied the man before her. He was tall, with broad shoulders and arms hardened by years of physical labor. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his blue eyes were kind beneath the brim of his worn hat. He'd removed it upon entering, holding it respectfully in his hands. "You've been here all night?" she asked warily. "Slept outside, madam. Just wanted to make sure you two were all right. This is mighty isolated country for a woman and baby alone." Clara's posture relaxed slightly, though suspicion remained in her eyes. "Thank you for tending to Samuel, Mr. Dawson, but we're fine. I've managed these past months on my own." "No offense meant, madam. Just doing what any decent man would." He glanced around the cabin, noting the well-maintained interior despite its simplicity. "You've got a fine place here. My husband built it," Clara said, her voice tight. Before he passed, understanding flickered across Beau's face. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam, Mrs. Wilson," she corrected. "Clara Wilson, Mrs. Wilson," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "If you don't mind my saying, you looked plumb exhausted last night. How long's it been since you had a proper night's sleep?" Clara bounced Samuel gently in her arms, avoiding Beau's gaze. "That's hardly your concern, Mr. Dawson." "No, it's not," he agreed easily. "But I couldn't help noticing you've got quite a bit of work around here that might be hard to manage alone with a little one." He gestured toward the window, where Clara could see her unplanted vegetable garden and the sagging corner of the barn roof. "I manage," she said stiffly. Beau nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "Of course you do. I'll be on my way then. Just wanted to make sure you were awake before I left." As he turned to go, Samuel reached out a small hand toward him, making a sound that was almost like protest. Clara looked down at her son in surprise, then back at the tall cowboy. "Mr. Dawson," she called as he reached the door. Thank you for taking care of Samuel last night. And for letting me sleep." Beau turned, a small smile crossing his face. "He's a good boy, has quite a set of lungs on him though." Despite herself, Clara smiled. "Yes, he does. He's been colicky lately. I haven't had much sleep." Beau hesitated, then asked, "Have you tried catnip tea?" "My mother used to make it for my little sisters when they had the colic." Clara blinked in surprise. "No, I haven't. I noticed some growing wild not far from here. I could show you if you'd like." Clara studied him for a long moment. Every instinct told her to send this stranger on his way, but there was something trustworthy in his steady gaze, and the fact remained that he'd had every opportunity to harm her or Samuel during the night and had done nothing but help. "I'd appreciate that," she said finally. "And perhaps, would you care for some breakfast before you go? It's the least I can offer for your kindness." The smile that spread across Beau's face transformed him, erasing years of hard living from his features. "That would be mighty fine, Mrs. Wilson." Clara set about preparing a simple breakfast of cornbread and bacon, with Samuel settled contentedly in his cradle. As she worked, she found herself stealing glances at the cowboy who sat at her table, his large frame making her small chair look like it belonged to a child. "Where are you headed, Mr. Dawson?" she asked as she placed a plate before him. "Whispering Pines," he replied. Hoping to find work at one of the ranches. I've been working cattle drives for years, but I'm getting a bit old for that life. Thought I might settle in one place for a while. Clara nodded, sitting across from him with her own plate. The Patterson Ranch might be hiring. They're the largest outfit around here. Beau nodded his thanks, both for the information and the food. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. How long have you been on your own, if you don't mind my asking? Clara stiffened slightly. James, my husband, passed 4 months ago. Fever took him. I'm sorry, Beau said sincerely. That's a hard thing, especially with a little one. Yes, Clara's voice was tight, but as I said, we manage. After breakfast, Beau showed Clara where the catnip grew along the edge of her property. As they walked back to the cabin, Samuel cradled in Clara's arms. Beau hesitated. Mrs. Wilson, I was thinking, before I head to town, I could help with some of those repairs your place needs. That barn roof won't make it through another snow if it's not fixed. Clara stopped walking, regarding him cautiously. Why would you do that? Beau shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable under her direct gaze. Seems like the right thing to do. I've got the skills and you've got need. I can't pay you, Clara said bluntly. Wasn't asking for payment, just a chance to do a good turn. Clara considered his offer. The roof did need fixing, and the vegetable garden needed to be planted soon if they were to have food for the coming winter. Tasks that James would have handled, tasks that seemed insurmountable to her alone. One day, she said finally. You can stay and help for one day and I'll provide meals, then you should be on your way to Whispering Pines. Beau nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. Yes, madam, one day it is. One day turned into 2, then 3. Beau fixed the barn roof, repaired the chicken coop, and helped Clara plant her vegetable garden. Each evening, he would ride off to make camp a respectful distance from the cabin, returning at dawn to continue working. On the 4th morning, when Samuel began crying at sunrise, Clara was surprised to hear Beau's deep voice through the open window, singing softly to the baby as he worked outside. Samuel immediately quieted, his cries turning to coos of delight. Clara watched from the doorway as Beau continued singing, unaware of her presence. His voice was surprisingly gentle for such a large man, and Samuel responded to it with obvious joy. He likes your voice, Clara said, causing Beau to turn in surprise. Seems to, Beau agreed, looking slightly embarrassed. I hope I didn't overstep. No, Clara said softly. It's nice to have someone else who can soothe him. That evening, as Beau prepared to leave for his campsite, Clara found herself reluctant to see him go. Samuel had been calmer these past days than he'd been since James died, and Beau's presence had lifted a weight from her shoulders that she hadn't realized was crushing her. Mr. Dawson, she called as he mounted his horse. There's a spare room in the barn. It's small, but it would be more comfortable than sleeping on the ground. Beau looked at her with surprise. That's kind of you, Mrs. Wilson, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition. It's a practical arrangement. You're helping me, and I'm offering you shelter in return. She hesitated, then added more softly, and I think we're past Mr. Dawson and Mrs. Wilson, don't you? Please call me Clara. A warm smile spread across Beau's face. Thank you, Clara, and I'd be pleased if you called me Beau. The days fell into a rhythm. Beau worked from dawn until dusk, repairing what needed fixing and helping Clara with the heavier tasks of running the homestead. In the evenings, they would sit together after supper, Beau often holding Samuel while Clara mended clothes or worked on household tasks. It was during these quiet evenings that Clara began to learn more about the quiet cowboy. Born in Texas, he'd left home at 17 after his parents died, working his way north with various cattle outfits. He'd never married, never settled in one place for long. Don't you get lonely? Clara asked one evening as they sat before the fire, Samuel sleeping peacefully in Beau's arms. Beau considered the question, his blue eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I suppose I did, though I didn't recognize it as loneliness at the time, just figured it was the life I was meant to lead. And now, he looked down at Samuel, a tenderness in his expression that made Clara's heart constrict. Now I'm not so sure. 2 weeks after Beau's arrival, Clara realized something had changed. She found herself watching him as he worked, noticing the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the gentle way his large hands cradled Samuel. the smile that transformed his face whenever the baby gripped his finger. She also noticed that he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, his gaze warm and appreciative but always respectful. The knowledge sent an unexpected thrill through her, followed immediately by guilt. James had been gone only 4 months. What kind of woman was she to be noticing another man so soon? At night, after putting Samuel to bed, Clara stood at her small mirror, studying her reflection. At 24, she was still young, but the past year had taken its toll. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her brown hair, once her pride, hung limp and dull around her face. Yet when Beau looked at her, she didn't feel worn out or plain. She felt seen in a way she hadn't since before James fell ill. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Beau standing there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb you, Clara, but there's a storm coming in. I've secured everything in the barn, but I thought you might want to bring in some extra firewood before it hits." Clara nodded, grateful for his foresight. "Thank you, Beau." They worked together to stack firewood next to the hearth, their hands occasionally brushing. Each brief contact sent warmth spreading through Clara's body, making her increasingly aware of his presence. The storm hit with surprising force, wind howling around the cabin and rain pelting against the roof. Samuel woke, startled by the thunder, and began to cry. Clara moved to comfort him, but Beau was already there, lifting the baby gently. "How about a song, little man?" he said softly, beginning to sing the lullaby that always calmed Samuel. Clara watched them, something tightening in her chest. Beau swayed slightly as he sang, his deep voice a comforting rumble beneath the storm's fury. Samuel's cries gradually subsided, his small body relaxing into sleep once more. "You're good with him," Clara said quietly as Beau laid Samuel back in his cradle. "He makes it easy," Beau replied, his voice equally soft. "He's a good boy. He's taken to you." Clara hesitated, then added, "We both have." Beau looked at her, his eyes serious in the dim light. "Clara, a tremendous crash from outside interrupted him. They both rushed to the window to see that a large tree branch had fallen onto the barn roof, partially collapsing it. "My horse." Beau exclaimed, already moving toward the door. Clara grabbed his arm. "Be careful." The rain was coming down in sheets as they ran to the barn. Inside, Beau's horse was nervous but unharmed, standing in a corner away from the damaged section. Rain poured through the hole in the roof, quickly turning the barn floor to mud. "We need to move him to the lean-to behind the cabin," Clara shouted over the storm. Together, they led the agitated horse through the rain to the sheltered area behind Clara's home. By the time they secured him there, they were both soaked to the skin and shivering. Back inside the cabin, Clara stoked the fire while Beau checked on Samuel, who miraculously had slept through the commotion. "You should change out of those wet clothes," Clara said, not meeting his eyes. "You'll catch your death otherwise." Beau looked down at his sodden clothing, then at the closed door. "I can't exactly go to the barn for my dry things." Clara hesitated, then went to a chest at the foot of her bed. "These were James's," she said, pulling out a shirt and pair of trousers. "They might be a bit small on you, but they're dry." Beau accepted the clothes, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you, I'll just—" He gestured toward the door. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't change out there in the storm. I'll turn my back." As Clara faced the wall, she was acutely aware of the sounds behind her, the rustle of fabric, the soft thud of boots being removed. Her cheeks burned, and she silently scolded herself for reacting like a schoolgirl. "I'm decent," Beau said after a moment. Clara turned to find him standing awkwardly in James's clothes, which indeed were too small, the sleeves ending well above his wrists and the trousers several inches too short. Despite the tension of the moment, Clara couldn't help but laugh. "You look like you've outgrown your Sunday best." Beau's lips twitched, and soon he was laughing too, the absurdity of the situation breaking the tension between them. "You need to change as well," he said when their laughter subsided. "I'll step outside." "Just turn your back," Clara said practically. "There's no sense in you getting soaked again." She changed quickly into a dry nightgown and wrapper, then hung their wet clothes near the fire to dry. The storm continued to rage outside, making the cabin feel like a small island of warmth and safety in a chaotic sea. "I should check on my horse," Beau said, moving toward the door. In this weather, you'll be soaked again in seconds. As if to emphasize her point, a flash of lightning illuminated the cabin, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Samuel stirred but didn't wake. "I suppose you're right," Beau conceded. "I'll check first thing in the morning." An awkward silence fell between them as they both realized the implications. With the barn partially collapsed and the storm raging, Beau had nowhere to sleep but the cabin. "You can take the bed," Clara offered. "I'll sleep in the rocker near Samuel." "I couldn't possibly take your bed, Clara. I'll be fine on the floor." Clara shook her head firmly. "The floor gets terribly cold, even with the fire. You've been working hard all day, you need proper rest." "So do you," Beau insisted. "I've slept on harder ground than this floor many times." In the end, they compromised. Clara took the bed, while Beau made a pallet on the floor nearby with extra blankets. As Clara blew out the lamp, she was intensely aware of his presence in the darkness, the sound of his breathing joining Samuel's softer rhythm. "Good night, Beau," she whispered. "Good night, Clara," came his deep reply, warm in the darkness. Clara lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and thinking about the man sleeping just a few feet away. She thought about James, about the love they had shared and the plans they had made. Plans that had died with him, leaving her alone to face an uncertain future. Except she wasn't alone anymore. Somehow, in just 2 short weeks, Beau Dawson had become essential to her and Samuel's lives. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Just before dawn, Clara woke to Samuel's hungry cries. Before she could rise, Beau was already up, lifting the baby gently from his cradle. "I've got him," he said softly, bringing Samuel to her. "Here you go, little man. Your mama will take care of you now." As Clara fed her son, Beau busied himself rebuilding the fire and preparing coffee. The domesticity of the moment struck Clara with unexpected force. This was what she had lost when James died, not just a husband, but a partner, someone to share the small, everyday moments that made up a life. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a washed, clean world. After breakfast, they went to assess the damage to the barn. The fallen branch had caused significant damage to the roof, but the structure itself was sound. "I can fix this," Beau said, examining the broken beams. "It'll take a few days, but it's not as bad as it looked last night." Clara nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Beau. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I'm glad I was." Over the next few days, Beau worked tirelessly to repair the barn roof. Each evening, exhausted but satisfied with his progress, he would join Clara and Samuel for dinner, then sit with them by the fire, sometimes reading from one of the few books Clara owned, sometimes just talking quietly. One evening, as Samuel slept peacefully in his cradle, Beau looked up from the book he was reading to find Clara watching him intently. "What is it?" he asked, closing the book. Clara hesitated, then spoke the question that had been on her mind for days. "Why are you still here, Beau? You came to this territory looking for ranch work, yet you've spent weeks helping a widow and her baby with no payment. Why?" Beau set the book aside, considering his answer carefully. "At first, it was just the right thing to do. You needed help and I could provide it. And now?" His blue eyes met hers steadily. "Now it's more than that." Clara's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" Beau rose from his chair, moving to kneel beside her. "I mean that somewhere along the way, helping you and Samuel became more important to me than finding ranch work. Being here with you both feels right in a way nothing else ever has." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Beau, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving James, and I would never want to disrespect that. I just wanted you to know why I've stayed." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "James was a good man, and I loved him deeply, but he's gone, and Samuel and I are still here, still living." She reached out to touch Beau's weathered face. "These past weeks with you have reminded me what it feels like to live, not just survive." Beau covered her hand with his own, his expression tender. "Clara, I've spent my whole life moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. But being here with you and Samuel has shown me what I've been missing." "And what's that?" Clara whispered. "A home," Beau said simply. "Not just a place, but people to care for, people who matter more than anything else." Clara felt something shift inside her, a piece of her heart that had been frozen in grief beginning to thaw. I care for you too, Beau, more than I thought possible after losing James. Beau's hand tightened around hers. I don't want to rush you, Clara. I know healing takes time. I'm willing to wait, to give you all the time you need. Clara looked into his earnest blue eyes and saw something she had feared she might never find again, a future, bright with possibility. I think, she said slowly, that sometimes life doesn't wait for us to be ready. Sometimes it brings us what we need exactly when we need it, even if we don't recognize it at first. Beau's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. Clara's eyes fluttered closed as she returned the kiss, her heart pounding with emotions too complex to name. When they separated, Beau rested his forehead against hers. I think I've been waiting my whole life to find you and Samuel, he whispered. And we've been waiting for you, Clara replied, even before we knew it. The next morning, Clara woke to find Beau already up, sitting at the table with Samuel in his lap, feeding him small spoonfuls of porridge. Look who's awake, Beau said, smiling up at her. We were trying to let you sleep in. Clara's heart swelled at the sight of them together, Samuel's small hands patting Beau's much larger ones excitedly. This man, who had wandered into their lives by chance, had become so essential to their happiness in such a short time. I've been thinking, Beau said as she joined them at the table. The Patterson Ranch can wait. There's still plenty to do around here before winter sets in. Clara smiled, understanding what he wasn't saying. Yes, there is, and I'd welcome the help. That day, as they worked side by side in the vegetable garden, Clara found herself watching Beau, admiring the strength in his arms as he turned the soil, the gentleness in his expression when he paused to check on Samuel, who lay on a blanket nearby. What are you thinking? Beau asked, catching her gaze. I'm thinking that I'm grateful you heard Samuel crying that night, Clara replied honestly, that you stopped instead of continuing on your way. Beau straightened, wiping his brow. Best decision I ever made. Later that evening, as they sat on the small porch watching the sunset, Samuel asleep inside, Beau took Clara's hand in his. There's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice serious. Clara tensed, suddenly afraid. In her experience, such statements rarely preceded good news. What is it? I've never had much to offer a woman, Beau began. No land, no house, just my horse and the skills I've learned over the years. But I want you to know that everything I am, everything I have, is yours and Samuel's if you'll have me. Clara's breath caught. Beau, I'm asking if you might consider a future with me, Clara. Not right away, I know it's too soon for that. But someday, when you're ready, I'd like to be more than just a helpful hand around your homestead. I'd like to be your husband and a father to Samuel. Tears filled Clara's eyes. She thought of James, of the love they had shared and the dreams they had built together. And she knew with sudden clarity that he would want her to be happy, to find love again, to give Samuel a father who would love and protect him. You already are more than a helpful hand, Beau, she said softly. You've become essential to us both. Hope blazed in Beau's eyes. Is that a yes? Clara squeezed his hand. It's I need time, but my heart is already walking in that direction. Beau brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I can work with that. As summer turned to fall, Beau and Clara fell into a comfortable routine. He continued to sleep in the repaired barn, respecting her need for time and space, but spent his days working alongside her and his evenings with her and Samuel by the fire. Samuel thrived under their combined care, growing stronger and more curious by the day. He learned to crawl, chasing after Beau's boots with delighted determination. His first word was Mama, but his second, to Clara's amused resignation, was Beau, his attempt at Beau. Beau's face had lit up with such joy at hearing Samuel call his name that Clara felt her last reservations melting away. This man, who had come into their lives by chance, loved her son as if he were his own. And she, despite her initial wariness, had come to love him with a depth that sometimes took her breath away. One crisp October evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Clara stood at the window watching Beau chop firewood. The months of physical labor had changed him subtly, adding muscle to his already impressive frame, deepening the tan on his face and hands. but it was the contentment in his expression that struck her most, the look of a man who had found his place in the world. When he came inside, bringing a blast of cold air with him, Samuel immediately crawled toward him, arms raised in a clear demand to be picked up. "Well, hello there, partner," Beau said, swinging the baby up into his arms. "Have you been looking after your mama while I was out?" Samuel patted Beau's face with his small hands, babbling excitedly. Clara watched them, her heart full to bursting with love for them both. "Beau," she said softly. He looked up, his smile fading at her serious expression. "What is it, Clara? Is something wrong?" "No," she said, moving closer. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, everything is right in a way I never thought it could be again." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Clara, I'm ready, Beau," she said simply. "If you still want to build a life with us, I'm ready." The joy that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Still holding Samuel, he closed the distance between them, wrapping his free arm around Clara's waist. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. "I don't want to rush you." Clara reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Beau Dawson, and I want you to be my husband and Samuel's father." Beau's kiss was tender but filled with promise, a pledge of all they would build together. Samuel, caught between them, giggled and patted both their faces, as if giving his own blessing to their union. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Whispering Pines, with Samuel balanced on Beau's hip during the ceremony. The townsfolk, though initially curious about the cowboy who had won the heart of the widow Wilson, welcomed him warmly when they saw the obvious love between the three of them. That winter was harsh, with snowdrifts higher than the cabin windows and temperatures that froze the creek solid. But inside the small homestead, warmth and love abounded. Beau proved to be a devoted husband and father, teaching Clara the skills he'd learned during his years on the trail, strategies for surviving the brutal Montana winters that she hadn't known. Each night, after Clara nursed Samuel and laid him in his cradle, Beau would sing him to sleep, his deep voice gentle as he sang the lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. And each night, Clara would watch them together, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought this man to their door on that desperate night months ago. When spring finally arrived, bringing with it new growth and renewed hope, Beau began work on an addition to the cabin. "Samuel will need his own room soon enough," he explained as he laid the foundation. "And maybe someday he'll need to share it with a brother or sister." Clara blushed at his words, but the idea filled her with joy. A family, larger and more loving than she had dared to hope for after James's death. A family built not on the ashes of what she had lost, but on the foundation of what she and Beau had found together. Summer brought with it the first anniversary of Beau's arrival at the homestead. To celebrate, he took Clara and Samuel on a picnic to a nearby meadow, where wildflowers bloomed in a riot of colors, and a small stream provided a perfect place for Samuel to splash and play under their watchful eyes. As Samuel napped on a blanket in the shade, Beau took Clara's hand, leading her to sit beside him on a fallen log. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. Clara watched curiously as he withdrew a small wooden box, expertly carved with a pattern of intertwined leaves. "I've been working on this in secret," he explained, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I wanted to give you something to mark our year together." Clara opened the box to find a delicate silver locket inside. "Oh, Beau, it's beautiful. Open it," he urged. Inside was a tiny portrait of Samuel on one side and a lock of his baby hair on the other, preserved beneath a small piece of glass. Tears filled Clara's eyes. "It's perfect, thank you." Beau helped her fasten the locket around her neck, his fingers lingering on the soft skin at the nape of her neck. "I want you to know, Clara, that this past year has been the happiest of my life. You and Samuel have given me something I never thought I'd have: a home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving." Clara turned to face him, cupping his weathered cheek in her palm. "You've given us just as much, Beau. You brought laughter back into our lives when I thought joy was behind us forever." As they returned home that evening, Samuel sleeping in Beau's arms, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate night when a crying baby had stopped a lonely cowboy in his tracks, to this peaceful evening, heading home as a family. That night, after they had put Samuel to bed, Beau took Clara in his arms, holding her close as they swayed slightly in front of the fire, no music playing except the rhythm of their hearts. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her head resting against his chest. "Samuel is getting so big, and the cabin will feel crowded once the new addition is complete." "Are you saying you want a bigger house?" Beau asked, his tone teasing. "Because I can build you a mansion if that's what you want." Clara laughed softly. "No, not a bigger house, but maybe a bigger family." Beau went still for a moment, then leaned back to look into her eyes. "Clara, are you saying what I think you're saying?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "I'm with child, Beau. We're going to have a baby." The joy that spread across his face was a sight Clara knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." "Our baby," Clara agreed, touching her still flat stomach. "Samuel will have a little brother or sister come winter." Beau placed his large hand over hers, his expression becoming serious. "I promise you, Clara, I will be the best father I can be to both our children. I'll teach them everything I know, love them with all my heart, and protect them with my life if necessary." "I know you will," Clara said softly. "You already are." As winter approached once more, Clara's belly grew round with their child. Samuel, now a toddler with boundless energy, took great interest in his mother's changing shape, often patting her stomach and saying "baby" in his sweet, childish voice. Beau was even more attentive than usual, taking on more of the homestead chores to spare Clara any strain. In the evenings, he would read to Samuel, while Clara sewed tiny clothes for the coming child, the three of them creating a picture of domestic contentment that would have seemed impossible to Clara a year and a half earlier. The first snow had just begun to fall when Clara's labor pains began. Beau sent their nearest neighbor, a kind elderly woman who lived a mile away, to fetch the midwife from town while he stayed with Clara, helping her walk around the cabin between contractions as Samuel watched wide-eyed from his newly built bed in the small addition. "You're doing wonderfully," Beau encouraged as Clara gripped his hands through a particularly strong contraction. "Just breathe, sweetheart. That's it." The midwife arrived just as the contractions grew closer together. She shooed Beau out of the bedroom with instructions to keep Samuel occupied, but Clara called him back. "I want him with me," she insisted, her face flushed with effort. "I need him here." The midwife, seeing the determination in Clara's eyes, relented. "Just stay up by her head," she instructed Beau, "and keep out of my way." Beau held Clara's hand, wiping her brow with a cool cloth and murmuring encouragement as she labored to bring their child into the world. When she felt she couldn't continue, his steady presence gave her strength. When fear threatened to overwhelm her, his unwavering confidence calmed her. And when, after hours of labor, their daughter slipped into the world with a lusty cry, it was Beau's joyful tears that matched Clara's own. "She's perfect," he whispered, staring in awe at the tiny, red-faced infant the midwife placed in Clara's arms. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Hope, a testament to the feeling she had brought into their lives. Samuel, after initial wariness, became a devoted big brother, bringing his toys to show the baby and patting her tiny head with careful hands. As Clara watched Beau hold their daughter, singing the same lullaby he had sung to Samuel on that fateful night, she felt a sense of completion she had never known before. This was what happiness looked like, not the absence of pain or loss, but the presence of love so strong it made everything else bearable. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The homestead flourished under Beau and Clara's combined efforts, expanding to include a larger barn, a well-tended orchard, and a flock of sheep whose wool Clara spun and wove during the winter months. Samuel grew into a sturdy, thoughtful boy of 6, with Clara's gentle heart and Beau's love of the outdoors. Hope, at 4, was her father's shadow, following him everywhere and soaking up his stories of life on the trail with wide-eyed wonder. And there was Benjamin, their youngest at 2, a sturdy toddler with Beau's blue eyes and Clara's determined spirit. 3 children, a far cry from the lonely existence Clara had faced after James's death. One evening in early summer, as they sat on the expanded porch watching the children play in the yard, Beau took Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked softly. "The night I first came here," Clara nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "Often." "How could I not? It changed everything." Beau's arm tightened around her. "I was supposed to be in Whispering Pines by morning, had my route all planned out, but something made me take a different trail, one that led right past your homestead." "Providence," Clara said simply. "Maybe so," Beau agreed. "All I know is that when I heard Samuel crying, something inside me just stopped. I couldn't ride past, couldn't ignore it." Clara smiled, watching as Samuel helped Hope climb onto the wooden swing Beau had built, while Benjamin toddled after them, determined not to be left out. "And then you said you'd sing him to sleep." "I didn't know I remembered any lullabies until that moment," Beau admitted with a chuckle. "My mother used to sing to us every night, but I hadn't thought about those songs in years." "Well, I'm grateful you remembered," Clara said, turning to press a kiss to his weathered cheek. "That song changed all our lives." Beau caught her face in his hands, his blue eyes serious as they met hers. "Loving you and our children has been the greatest privilege of my life, Clara. I thank God every day for leading me to your door that night." Clara's heart swelled with love for this man who had become everything to her husband, father to her children, partner in all things. "And I thank God for giving me the courage to let you in." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Beau began to sing softly, the same lullaby he had sung that first night. The children, hearing their father's deep voice, abandoned their play to run to the porch, clamoring to join in the familiar song. Clara looked around at her family, at Beau, his face lined now with laughter more than hardship, at Samuel, so tall and strong for his 6 years, at Hope, with her father's blue eyes and Clara's gentle smile, at Benjamin, still baby-cheeked but fiercely independent, and felt a happiness so complete it brought tears to her eyes. From a single act of kindness on a dark night, "I'll sing him to sleep," had grown this life, this love, this family. It wasn't the life Clara had planned when she and James had built their homestead, but it was beautiful in its own right, a testament to the heart's capacity to heal, to hope, to love again. As they sat together in the gathering twilight, their voices joined in song. Clara knew with bone-deep certainty that they had found what everyone seeks but few truly find. Not just a house, but a home. Not just companionship, but love. Not just a family, but a place where each of them, from the youngest to the oldest, belonged completely and was cherished absolutely. And it had all begun with a baby's cry and a cowboy's song in the vast wilderness of the Montana Territory.